Before I start this video, I'd like to point out that the author of this story goes into detail on certain deep web topics that may be extremely disturbing to some viewers. If you are easily disturbed by these topics, I suggest you go watch another video. I've always had a really sparked interest in what is commonly known as the deep web. The point of this post is not, though, to act as a guide to the deep web, or to provide an explanation of what it is. No Sleep is not our deep web or our advice, but a place to share horror stories. And though the deep web has some good uses, it also has an incredibly dark side to it. The dark web is a small corner of the deep web containing the stereotypical content, bulk drugs, CP, etc., that the deep web is notorious for. I took my first steps into this little excavation of mine into the darkest parts of anonymous sites under the surface of web browsing in an attempt to undermine the stereotype that the deep web is more a home to dark, illegal websites than anything good. Well, I came out of this with more than I could have ever expected, and now my view on humanity in general has forever been changed. It took me quite a while, 3 to 4 weeks, to get enough information to start really delving deep into what I will now refer to as the dark web, the small corner of the deep web that is basically the house of horrors. Lots of talking around, honing information from chat rooms, and taking lots of notes. Even had to make a couple phone calls to some more than shady individuals. Not a comfortable experience. By the end of my trek of gathering as much information as possible at the time and getting a good contact list, I took my first steps into the outer layer of the deep web, so to speak. The hard part is that once you get deeper, a lot of sites have ever-changed URLs, extensive invitation queues, and at times, pricey entrance costs that may or may not end up as cash spent on a phony operation. A lot of it is luck, meeting people at the right time and place, and taking good notes. I had a good streak of luck and took good notes, enough to get me to the places I entered. But what I did notice is that once I got into the first site that I will next talk about, it became much easier to get into other sites, as it was much more freely talked about and information was passed around much more. Chat rooms in the dark web are an information honeyhole. I knew I had broken the barrier when I got into Centrix. Centrix was one of the more well-known general markets, so to speak. A good example to compare it to would be Agortha or Silk Road. Now, Centrix, from what I hoarded via lots of questions on the chat room over the course of a couple days, has been around for about 11 months and has been untouched by any means of being shut down. Which surprises me because it has everything from Agortha or Silk Road, but to a much greater extent and a lot more variety. What some sites dedicate their whole selling product to be, Centrix had subcategories for. Just a few brief examples: snuff films, bulk drugs of all varieties, fake everything, IDs, licenses, you name it, a varied censored section of CP, various illegally obtained memberships such as Netflix, porn, etc. The list goes on. Another thing that is a bit chilling is the fact that they took a great effort to crack down on scams. The big deal on sites like Agortha or Silk Road is that they have a lot of scam vendors. This site didn't, and they had a lot of proof to back it up. Samples, intros, etc. I also met a guy in a chat room that was nice as far as that goes for an active dark web user like himself, who verified and hashed some of the links I had collected and vaguely sent me in the direction of other sites for my personal use. This was a great help and led me to my next site, which, from the illegality and general morale of the site, is what I consider the next layer, or gate, into the dark web. Brink Warehouse was actually quite fascinating, not horrific to an extent, but had a different kind of dark backlash. It was a virtual warehouse of textual guides, notes, leaked documents, torrented books, etc. Now, a summary like this might seem alright, but take into account that the guides included things like how to make a drone-based homemade explosive and how to kidnap adolescents in their sleep. Illegal leaked documents galore, anywhere from US classified cases to foreign affairs. Also included guides on illegally modifying weapons, joining terrorist groups, guides to scripting and nulling bank accounts, and so on and so forth. Not a very fun sight. The next site I headed to is where it starts to get formally creepy, and where I found it necessary to post this on No Sleep. I got access to the site with no name, which I consider to be the start of the darkest of the dark web of the deep web, from rStranded, who was in a chat room on ChitChat, a very common deep web chat room site that most of you have probably already stopped in. Well, talk comes to talk, and we end up on the topic of snuff films. How common they are, where they are usually filmed and why, etc. I get his trust. We resume this chat in a private room that he had, and keep in mind that only getting information was my main reason for chatting. I'm not into snuff films, though they do fascinate me. We talked for a good 20 minutes before, without me having to even ask. He hooked me up with a site we'll call Site 5611. Now, this site required an invite, extensive registration, questioning, and a one-on-one meeting with what I assumed was a site director or admin. He or she was one harsh motherfucker, and the stern punishments for breaking the site rules were laid out. The guy who invited me, rStranded, I guess was a long-timer on 5611, who had permission to let me take a tour of the site. Now, I did ask for a formal site name for future reference, so I didn't have to name it 5611, and he said that the site had no name, and that it was purely based to display its content with moderate membership. The title, he said, would only make it easier to identify, which they did not want to happen. 5611 had a small membership that, he said, the runners of the site tried to cater to very fondly, as membership is 1.588 bitcoins per month, which is approximately $355. Upon entering the site, I had to check the "Are you older than 18" box for the 5th time since I started getting signed up. The site's design was bland and blocky, with a pure white background and very blocky, close-together writing. In the top right corner, there were the options to log out, add funds to my balance, and then a small wallet emoticon that displayed an empty Bitcoin client-side balance. But that was barely on my mind. My mind was on the center of the screen. In a single row down the center of the screen, there were single frames with captions and descriptions. The top one had a still of a table with various blades and blunt weapons laid out. The title, 24-year-old female, sleeping, suggested death, with a 2.25 Bitcoin price tag along the side. A timer in green text was counting down. 11:51, 11:50, 11:49. Under the timer, in the same green font, was 78 out of 100. A couple seconds later, the 78 turned into a 79. Realization hit me in the face like a bat. This was a paid snuff site. With a shaky hand, I scrolled down through the seemingly endless snapshots and captions. One caught my eye. Quick watch, homeless, 0.22 Bitcoin, large view, low quality. It was like an attention-whoring YouTube title, but it seemed to be working. In the eerie green font, 783 out of 1,000 was displayed, a jaw-dropping number in my eyes. I decided this needed to be documented, so I did a quick transaction, put 0.30 Bitcoin in my site wallet, and clicked on the arrow to enter. It took a minute or two to complete the transaction, and after about a 5-minute buffer, I was in the showing. There was no chat box, only a slightly lighter border of gray and static. The same green timer was now in the bottom right of the screen. 3, 2, 1. The square blurred, revealing a city street. What seemed to be Arabic writing was on various shop signs and advertisements. Light from a street post gave a fuzzy glow to the scene. The cameraman, from the position of the camera, seemed to be leaning against a wall, the shot focused on a dinky red junker on the street's curb. From the side of the camera's view, a gloved finger points towards the entrance of a dark alley, where a man lays on his side like a breathing pile of rags, obviously homeless and alone. The finger makes a motion towards the car, and 3 men quietly exit the car and walk along the storefronts toward the sleeping homeless figure. The quality is totally shit, but the scene can still be made out and is enhancing by my horrid imagination about what is to come. About 5 meters from the homeless victim, the lanky group of thugs pull out plain white theater masks from their jackets, take out various small weapons, and pounce around the corner onto the innocent, unsuspecting victim. The camera picks up the quick shuffling of feet as the cameraman runs towards the scene, catching the thugs thrashing and stomping the man from his slumber. "Cut him up," the cameraman's thickly accented voice commands the thugs, who begin to slash the victim at a wild speed like hyenas tearing into caught prey. Blood sprays onto the wall and onto the thugs' white masks. It's so horrible, my stomach barely holds on. I can't take it. Logging off Tor, I take a few more security measures and shut off my computer, taking some deep breaths and sipping from a Coors Light. I logged on about a week later, and never thought to go back on 5611. I never contacted anyone from my past sites, and I knew in my heart that this would be my last visit to any site on the deep web. I was thoroughly encouraged to not go on, because with 5611, that had really been, in my mind, the last straw. I had proven to myself that the dark web, even though it has some good parts, is really just a beacon of humanity's horrific actions. I had proven to myself that sites like 5611 exist, but I just felt the need to cover the last huge part of the dark web that is, in my mind, the worst of it all. Child pornography. Candy Palace is a huge site. Do some digging and get some sources. You will find it. From the videos, I have come to the conclusion that it is all hosted in one location in a foreign country. I always wondered that if there were all these snuff films and child sex slave dungeons that are often spoken about, that there would have to be a suitable amount of missing children cases and unsolved murder cases to go along with them. Some research and asking around concluded that many of the filmed murders in child porn director rings are in fact in foreign countries, where getting away with these kinds of actions is a piece of cake, in the words of an aspiring director in a Candy Palace chat room. I will not go into specific detail about any one video on Candy Palace. I will only lay out some basic stats and descriptions and let you find the rest if you so please. The main chat room had several hundred chatters in total between the various subchats. They actually had a very detailed profile of each child. An example was Tatasa, 9 years old, black hair, and then included a list of, if I remember correctly, 83 videos she starred in, and counting. The children were usually smothered in makeup and, besides for what seemed like a designated 2 to 3 stars, not extremely physically hurt via evident beating. Double penetration, binding, gay, forced one-on-one, knife, roleplay, chamber, and dungeon were the top video tags. Each video has 1 to 2 plus tags. If I remember correctly, there were a total of 17 stars. Nobody ever brought up anything about if they are kidnapped, imported, or imprisoned. All anybody cared about was watching, so getting information on that topic was hard. Most of the scenes are filmed in various sets, such as era-style dungeons, surgery rooms, etc. No grimy bedrooms or warehouses or basements. Nothing that fits a common stereotype. It was basically Pornhub with a pink, white, black color scheme and 6 to 12-year-olds. It is a nightmare. I never look at people the same. Throughout taking this research-oriented trip through the dark web, my view on humanity has been changed. Every video I watched in the name of research chinked away at my emotions, often left me crying. Curiosity broke me, and it has been nearly a year since I have fully recovered. This is my, case file for my research on this subject. Now, before you launch Tor and find these sites, please know, there is no enjoyable, entertaining, or at all suitable content on this network. You will be left in tears. You will be scarred. And worst of all, you will never view others the same way again.